Story title: The Girl He Left at the Altar. 5 years ago, he stood at the bonding altar and chose someone else. She watched him do it. Then she disappeared so completely that even the wolves couldn't find her. Now his pack is dying, his bond is broken, and she is the only one who can stop it. He found her. She has nothing left to say to him. Chapter 1. The Life She Built from Ash. Her name was Iris now. Not the name she'd been born with, not the name that had been spoken at the bonding altar 5 years ago in the voice of a man who had then turned away from her and spoken a different name entirely. Iris Vane. She'd chosen it the night she crossed the territory border with nothing but a bag and the specific kind of pain that had no sound to it, the kind that sat in the sternum and made breathing a deliberate act. Iris Vane ran a bakery in a small coastal town called Marin's Point, 900 miles from Ashford Territory, 300 miles from the nearest pack boundary. She'd chosen the distance with the precision of a woman who understood that wolves could track scent across 50 miles in favorable wind, who had spent the first year of her new life learning to suppress her wolf signature the way other people learn to suppress a regional accent, deliberately, continuously, until it became second nature. The bell above the door rang at 5:47 on a Thursday morning. She didn't look up from the bench. The door was unlocked because deliveries came early, and she'd never bothered to change the habit. She said without turning, "Not open yet, back at 6. Silence. Not the silence of someone leaving, the silence of someone standing in the doorway, deciding something. She knew the difference. She'd been trained to know the difference in a world where silence had shapes. She turned. He was standing in the doorway of her bakery with flour dust in the air between them and the cold pre-dawn dark behind him, and he looked like the last 5 years had been paid for in a currency she hadn't agreed to accept on his behalf. Broader than she remembered, something behind his eyes that hadn't been there before. Not age, though there was that too. Something broken and reset imperfectly, like a bone that had healed wrong. His name was Caden Voss. He was the alpha of the Ashford pack, the man who had stood at the bonding altar 5 years ago and chosen Seraphine Caldwell instead of her, and he was standing in the middle of her life, looking at her like she was the last solid thing in a world that had been dissolving. She put down the dough. She looked at him for exactly 3 seconds. Then she said, "We're closed," and turned back to the bench.
Chapter 2. What he had to say. He didn't leave. She'd known he wouldn't. She'd known the moment she recognized him that this was not a conversation she could close the door on, because Caden Voss had never in his life accepted a closed door as a final answer, and 5 years of whatever had carved him into this haggard version of himself had not changed that particular quality. She kept working. If her hands were doing something, her face didn't have to. "Lyra," he said, the name she'd had before. It landed on her like a hand on an old wound. "That's not my name," she said. A pause. "Iris," he said, and the way he said it, careful, deliberate, honoring the choice even while it clearly cost him something, was the first thing he'd done in 5 years that she gave him credit for. "How did you find me?" she said, not a question, a forensic statement. "Took 3 years," he said. "You were thorough." "I intended to be." "I know." Another pause. He wasn't moving from the doorway. She understood he was giving her the distance deliberately, not hovering, not advancing, planting himself at the furthest respectful point and staying there. "I wouldn't have come if it wasn't—" "Don't," she said. "Iris, don't tell me you wouldn't have come otherwise," she said, still not turning, "because that is the exact shape of every lie that was ever told to me, and I am done with that shape entirely." Silence. She heard him exhale, something in it that was not quite defeat and not quite relief, the sound of a man deciding to stop managing a conversation and just be honest in it. "The pack is sick," he said. "Not a disease, A fracture. Pack bond fracture. Deep level. The kind that happens when the alpha bond is compromised. People are losing shift control. The youngest wolves can't shift at all. 3 of the elders have been in fever for 6 weeks. Our healer has run out of options. She was very still now, though her hands kept moving. The bond broke, she said, flat, clinical. 8 months ago, he said, when Seraphine. He stopped, started again. When the bond between us ended. She set down the rolling pin. She turned around. He looked worse, face on. The amber eyes she'd spent years trying to forget were the same and entirely changed. The same color, the same intensity, but carrying something that had not been in them 5 years ago. The specific exhaustion of someone who had made a catastrophic choice, lived inside the consequences, and arrived on the other side alone. The bond ended, she said, not broke, ended. There's a difference. A forced bond, a bond that wasn't true, doesn't fracture when it ends. It dissolves, clean. She held his gaze. Which means the fracture you're describing isn't from the bond ending, it's from something before that. He stared at her. You've been studying, he said. I've had 5 years and nothing else to do with myself in that department, she said. Iris, our pack healer has a doctorate in pack biology. He said, your pack healer is wrong about the source, she said. Or he's right about the fracture and wrong about the cause. Either way, you're treating a symptom. She crossed her arms. What you're describing is a true bond fracture, which means there was a true bond somewhere in your pack that was severed, not a forced bond, a real one. The bakery was very quiet. Flour dust turned in the light. Caden said, very quietly, I know. That's why I'm here. She understood then what he was saying, what he had driven 900 miles through the night to stand in her doorway and say, the thing that had no good words and all the wrong ones. No, she said. Iris, you stood at that altar, she said, and her voice was level. She had spent 5 years making it level for exactly this kind of moment. You chose her, in front of the whole pack, in front of me. She held his gaze. I am not the solution to the problem your choice created. I know, he said. I'm not asking you to be. I'm asking you to save 47 people who didn't make that choice. She hated that he said that. She hated how precisely it landed. Get out of my bakery, she said. Come back at 6 when it's open, order something, and then tell me everything about the fracture, and I will tell you whether I can help. Not because of you, for the 47. He nodded once. He left. She stood in her bakery and put both hands flat on the bench and breathed through the specific pain of a wound she'd believed was healed, discovering it was merely scar tissue. And scar tissue under pressure was its own kind of agony. At 6 o'clock, he came back through the front door with 47 people depending on him, and she made him an espresso and listened. Chapter 3. The shape of what he'd done. She listened for 2 hours. He told her everything with the specific thoroughness of someone who had decided the only currency he had left was honesty and was going to spend every last piece of it. He told her about the fracture, the symptoms, the timeline, the progression. He told her about his pack healer's diagnosis and the 3 treatment attempts that had failed. He told her about the children who couldn't shift and the elders in fever for 6 weeks. His healer has run out of options. She was very still now, though her hands kept moving. The bond broke, she said, flat, clinical. 8 months ago, he said, when Seraphine. He stopped, started again. When the bond between us ended. She set down the rolling pin. She turned around. He looked worse, face on. The amber eyes she'd spent years trying to forget were the same and entirely changed. The same color, the same intensity, but carrying something that had not been in them 5 years ago.
the specific exhaustion of someone who had made a catastrophic choice, lived inside the consequences, and arrived on the other side alone. The bond ended, she said, not broke, ended. There's a difference. A forced bond, a bond that wasn't true, doesn't fracture when it ends. It dissolves, clean. She held his gaze. Which means the fracture you're describing isn't from the bond ending, it's from something before that. He stared at her. You've been studying, he said. I've had 5 years and nothing else to do with myself in that department, she said. Iris, our pack healer has a doctorate in pack biology. He said, your pack healer is wrong about the source, she said, or he's right about the fracture and wrong about the cause. Either way, you're treating a symptom. She crossed her arms. What you're describing is a true bond fracture, which means there was a true bond somewhere in your pack that was severed, not a forced bond, a real one. The bakery was very quiet. Flour dust turned in the light. Caden said, very quietly, I know. That's why I'm here. She understood then what he was saying, what he had driven 900 miles through the night to stand in her doorway and say, the thing that had no good words and all the wrong ones. No, she said. Iris, you stood at that altar, she said, and her voice was level. She had spent 5 years making it level for exactly this kind of moment. You chose her in front of the whole pack, in front of me. She held his gaze. I am not the solution to the problem your choice created. I know, he said. I'm not asking you to be. I'm asking you to save 47 people who didn't make that choice. She hated that he said that. She hated how precisely it landed. Get out of my bakery, she said. Come back at 6 when it's open, order something, and then tell me everything about the fracture, and I will tell you whether I can help, not because of you, for the 47. He nodded once. He left. She stood in her bakery and put both hands flat on the bench and breathed through the specific pain of a wound she'd believed was healed, discovering it was merely scar tissue. And scar tissue under pressure was its own kind of agony. At 6 o'clock, he came back through the front door with 47 people depending on him, and she made him an espresso and listened. Chapter 3. The shape of what he'd done. She listened for 2 hours. He told her everything with the specific thoroughness of someone who had decided the only currency he had left was honesty and was going to spend every last piece of it. He told her about the fracture, the symptoms, the timeline, the progression. He told her about his pack healer's diagnosis and the 3 treatment attempts that had failed. He told her about the children who couldn't shift and the elders in fever for 6 weeks. His healer has run out of options. She was very still now, though her hands kept moving. The bond broke, she said, flat, clinical. 8 months ago, he said, when Seraphine, he stopped, started again, when the bond between us ended. She set down the rolling pin. She turned around. He looked worse face on. The amber eyes she'd spent years trying to forget were the same and entirely changed. The same color, the same intensity, but carrying something that had not been in them 5 years ago. The specific exhaustion of someone who had made a catastrophic choice, lived inside the consequences, and arrived.
Chapter 5. What the Pack Saw. The pack watched her work. She knew they were watching, and she didn't perform for it, and she didn't perform against it. She simply worked. The long, focused hours she'd taught herself in the years between. The patience she'd developed for things that couldn't be rushed. The specific presence that the best healers had. The quality of being entirely in the room with a person rather than behind glass. The 3 youngest wolves responded by the second morning. The shift control returned gradually. First the partial shifts, then the full, then the specific ease of it, the body remembering what it knew.
The 7-year-old shifted for the first time in 6 weeks and looked at his own paws with an expression of such pure joy that Iris had to leave the room for 60 seconds and do something with her face before she came back. The elder fever broke on the second night. She'd sat with them through it, the long, careful work of supporting the pack bond from the edges while it stabilized from the center, a process that required her own wolf to be fully present and fully engaged in a way she hadn't allowed since she'd left Ashford. Her wolf, it turned out, had opinions about being back. She managed them. The pack watched all of this, and she felt the shift in their frequency as she worked, the specific quality of a group of people recalibrating around a presence. Not transferring loyalty, not replacing anything, just acknowledging. She is real. Her work is real. Something about her belongs to this place. Mira told her on the second evening, sitting in the kitchen with tea and the comfortable silence of women who knew each other too well. They remember you. I've been gone 5 years, Iris said. Wolves don't forget the people their alpha bonds to, Mira said, simply, factually, like she was reporting weather. He bonded to Seraphine, Iris said. He tried, Mira said. Iris looked at her. Don't, she said. I'm not doing anything, Mira said, in exactly the same tone as the gate. The ceremony is tomorrow. After that, I go home. Home, Mira repeated, the word carrying exactly enough weight to be heard without being a statement. Marin's Point, Iris said firmly, my bakery, my life. And you're happy there, Mira said. A pause. I'm whole there, Iris said, which took everything I had, and I'm not dismantling it for... Nobody's asking you to dismantle anything, Mira said quietly. I'm just asking if you're happy. Iris held her tea in both hands and looked at the table. I was, she said, before Thursday. Mira said nothing, which was its own answer and its own kindness. Chapter 6. The Night Before. He found her at the East Meadow. Of course he did. She'd gone there because she needed to be somewhere the pack frequency was quiet, and the East Meadow had always been that, away from the house, the trees thinning to open land, the specific quality of outdoor silence that had nothing in it but wind and the distant sounds of the territory. She'd stood there at 14 when her wolf first came to the surface, and she'd stood there at 22 the night before the bonding ceremony, looking at the stars and allowing herself to want what she wanted. She'd never stood there since. His footsteps stopped 15 feet behind her. He didn't close the distance, and she didn't turn around. The pack is better, he said, even before the ceremony, whatever you've done these 2 days. It's the root stabilizing in advance of the closure. Tomorrow finishes it. Silence. I'm not going to ask you anything. I promised I wouldn't. Then why are you here? A long pause. Because it's the East Meadow, and you're standing in it, and in about 14 hours you're going to close this and get in your car, and I'm never going to see you again, and He stopped. I needed to stand here for a minute. I'm sorry. I'll go. He didn't move. She didn't tell him to. They stood in the East Meadow with 15 feet of old pain between them, and the stars overhead, and the territory breathing around them, and neither of them said anything for a long time. Why didn't you choose me? She said finally. She hadn't planned to say it. She'd believed for 5 years that she didn't need the answer, that she'd done the work of not needing it. She had apparently been wrong. He was quiet for a long time. Because I was afraid, he said. She turned around. He was standing with his hands at his sides, at his face completely open, no alpha composure, no management, just the face of a man saying the true thing at the moment it was too late to matter, and knowing it. Afraid of what? She said. Of how much it was, the bond, what I felt. It wasn't the quiet certainty I had expected. It was enormous, terrifying. I'd watched my father lose himself entirely when my mother died, and I thought if I bonded to something that large, something that complete, and then lost it. He stopped. I chose Seraphine because she was safe, because I could survive losing her. Iris stared at him. You chose her, she said slowly, because you loved me too much? I know how that sounds, he said. It sounds like the most catastrophically stupid thing I've ever heard, and her voice cracked on the last word, just slightly, the hairline fracture she'd been managing for 2 days, finally giving. Caden, I watched you at that altar, and I watched you choose someone else in front of everyone I had ever known, and then I left everything I had ever been because staying was not survivable. I know what I did, he said. I have known exactly what I did for 5 years, and there is not a single morning I have not— He stopped. I'm not telling you this so you'll forgive me. I don't expect that. I'm telling you because you asked me, and you deserve the truth, and I owe you every truth I have. The pack held them both. Stars overhead, wind in the grass, the territory breathing. I built something good, she said after a long time. Her voice was steadier. In Marin's point, it's real. It's mine. I know, he said. I'm glad. I'm not the person I was when I left here. I know that too, he said. She wouldn't have walked into this territory alone and fixed a pack bond fracture in 2 days. She was extraordinary. He stopped. What? She said. Something else entirely, he said quietly. She looked at him across the 15 feet and the 5 years and the East Meadow. Go back to the house, she said. I need to stand here alone for a while. He nodded. He turned. Caden, she said. He stopped. I don't forgive you yet. I want you to know yet is a word I'm choosing deliberately. She heard his breath, sharp, involuntary, the sound of a man receiving something he had not allowed himself to hope for. Okay, he said, and walked back to the house. She stood in the East Meadow for a long time and let herself feel all of it, the grief and the fury, and the 5 years, and the bakery, and Dolores and her almond croissants, and Mira at the gate, and the 7-year-old looking at his paws with pure joy, and Caden's voice saying, I was afraid. She felt all of it, and she didn't push any of it down. The stars moved overhead, and she stood in the territory that always knew her name, and she allowed herself to be exactly as complicated as she was.
Chapter 7. The Acknowledgement. The ceremony was held at the Bonding Stone. Of course it was. Pack law required the acknowledgement to take place at the same site as the original bond declaration, the witness stone that had watched every bonding in Ashford history, that held the record of every true bond in its surface, carved in the particular language that wolves read with their fingertips rather than their eyes. She stood at the stone on the 3rd morning with Darren beside her and Mira at the edge of the clearing, and 47 pack members arranged in the old witness formation. Not a ceremony she remembered attending, not something she'd ever expected to be at the center of, and certainly not like this. Caden stood across the stone from her. He looked like he hadn't slept. She had. She'd gone back to her room after the meadow and slept dreamlessly and woken with the specific clarity of someone who had been carrying something very heavy and had put it down. Not abandoned it, just set it aside long enough to rest. Darren spoke the opening words, the old form, the witness invocation, the recording of the occasion. His voice was steady, and she was grateful for the steadiness of other people. Then it was her turn. The acknowledgement required her to speak 3 things aloud at the witness stone: the name of the bond, the truth of its severing, and her formal release of any residual claim. 3 statements, clean, specific, irrevocable. She had practiced them. She had the words exactly. She put her hand on the witness stone and felt the pack frequency around her. Fractured, waiting, 47 people whose wellness depended on this moment being real and not performed, and she opened her mouth. The bond between Lyra Ashford and Caden Voss was real, she said. Her voice was steady. It was true, it was complete at the time of its severing, and it has been severed. Both parties are present, both parties are living, both parties are choosing their current state. She paused. I, Iris Vane, who was Lyra Ashford, formally release any residual claim to the Ashford Alpha bond line. The wound is acknowledged, the wound is real, the wound is mine to carry forward and his to carry forward, and it belongs to neither of us as an open fracture any longer. She felt it happen. In the pack frequency, the dissonance she'd been hearing since she crossed the border, the crack in the bell, resolved. Not all at once, not dramatically, a slow, deep, structural settling, the kind of sound a building makes when it finds its foundation, the fracture closing from the root. Around her, the pack exhaled. The youngest wolves, standing at the edge of the clearing with their parents, shifted without effort for the first time in months, a spontaneous collective response to the pack bond restoring, the way flowers turn toward restored light. She heard someone cry. She thought it might be Mira. She didn't look. She looked at Caden. He had his hand on the witness stone, and his eyes were wet, and he was looking at her with the expression of a man receiving something he had not asked for and did not deserve, and was going to spend the rest of his life honoring anyway. "It's done," she said. "Yes," he said. She stepped back from the stone. Chapter 8. What She Didn't Pack. She had planned to leave immediately after the ceremony. She had her bag in the car. She'd said her goodbyes the night before, or tried to. Mira had declined to accept them on the grounds that they were premature, which Iris had chosen not to argue with because arguing with Mira about timelines was a known losing position. She found herself in the kitchen instead, making bread. Not because anyone had asked, because her hands needed to do something, and the kitchen had flour and a decent bench and the particular comfort of a task that asked nothing of her emotionally and everything of her attention. She'd been at the bench for an hour before Caden appeared in the doorway. He stood there for a moment. "You're baking," he said. "Observation skills, very good," she said. Something crossed his face that was close to the expression she'd been looking for without knowing she was looking for it. Not the broken version, not the exhausted alpha version, something older than either. The version she'd known at 22, standing in this same kitchen when she'd been someone else and he'd been someone who hadn't made the choice he'd made yet. He sat at the kitchen table without being invited, which was the most honest thing he could have done. "Tell me about the bakery," he said. She looked at him. "Why?" "Because it's yours," he said, "and I want to know the things that are yours." She kept her hands in the dough. She told him. She told him about Dolores and the almond croissants and the second-hand mixer and the YouTube tutorials and the months when the bakery barely broke even and the specific morning she looked at the week's numbers and understood that it was working. She told him about Decimal, not her cat. Mira had a cat named Decimal. She'd stolen the name, and the story was briefly confusing. And she told him about the fishermen on Tuesdays and Marcus the harbor master, and what it felt like to stand at a bench at 4 in the morning in a place that was entirely hers. He listened, not waiting for his turn to speak, listening, the way she'd wished he'd listened 5 years ago, with his full attention, his amber eyes steady, nothing managed or calculated about it. "You built something extraordinary," he said. "Yes," she said, "I did." "And you're going back to it?" "Yes," she said. And then, because the yet was still there, and honesty was the only currency she had left, "I need to think about some things that need thinking about." He was very still. "Iris," he said. "Don't push," she said immediately. I'm not pushing. I just..." He stopped. "Can I tell you one thing, and then I won't say anything else about it unless you bring it up first?" She looked at him. "One thing," she said.
I have been afraid of losing you twice in my life. The first time I did something about it that destroyed us. The second time, he held her gaze. The second time, I am choosing to be afraid of losing you and not doing anything that destroys us. That's all. That's the thing. She looked at him for a long time. Flour on her hands, dough on the bench, the Ashford kitchen smelling like bread and wood smoke, and the specific, complicated territory of things that had been broken and were being, carefully, considered. "Go away now," she said. "I'm going to finish this bread, and then I'm going to drive home." He stood. He went. At the kitchen door, he stopped. "Iris," he said, without turning around. "What?" "The bread is going to be incredible." She laughed, suddenly and fully, the kind that surprised her, the kind that came from somewhere that had been closed and was deciding to be open. "Get out of my kitchen," she said. He got out of her kitchen. She finished the bread. She left it on the counter. She drove home.
Epilogue. 14 weeks later. The bell above the bakery door rang at 5:47 on a Thursday morning. She knew who it was before she turned around. She knew by the specific quality of the silence that followed the bell, the particular weight of a person standing in a doorway, deciding nothing this time because the decision had already been made before he got in the car. She kept working for a moment longer. Then she turned. He was in the doorway. He had flour on his jacket, which told her he'd stopped somewhere on the 900-mile drive, and she chose not to think about what that meant because it made her chest do something she wasn't ready to be architectural about yet. He held up a paper bag. "I stopped at a bakery outside Renfield," he said, "at 2 in the morning. The woman behind the counter told me I looked like a man on a mission and gave me the last almond croissant." He held it out. "I don't know if it's any good. I thought a gift, not a negotiation." She looked at the bag. She looked at him. "Renfield is 6 hours from here," she said. "Yes," he said. "You've been driving since before midnight." "Yes," he said. "Why?" He held her gaze across the bakery. "Because you told me you needed to think," he said, "and I gave you 14 weeks, and I need you to know that I am not here to ask you to give anything up. I am not here to take you back to Ashford or dismantle what you've built or ask you to be who you were. I am here because this is where you are, and I would like—" He stopped, tried again. "I would like to learn what you like in this version, what you order, what makes you laugh now, what the bakery smells like at 5 in the morning, and whether you still stand at the bench with your eyes closed when the bread is right." She was very still. "That's a strange thing to drive 900 miles to say," she said. "I know," he said. She crossed the bakery. She took the paper bag. She opened it and looked at the almond croissant and looked at him and thought about 14 weeks of thinking and decided she was done thinking for now and would do something else instead. "It's the lamination," she said. "That's how you tell if a croissant is good, if the layers separate cleanly." She broke it in half and gave him a piece and broke off a piece herself. "Dolores taught me that. She comes in every morning at 7:45. "I'd like to meet Dolores," he said carefully. "She'll have opinions about you," Iris said. "She has opinions about everything." "I can handle opinions," he said. She bit the croissant. He bit the croissant. "It's good," she said. "The lamination is good." "It's not as good as yours," he said. "No, it's not." She looked at him in her bakery at 5:47 in the morning, with flour on his jacket and 900 miles behind him, and the specific expression of a man who had been afraid of how much something was and decided to stop being afraid of it. "I open at 6, she said. "You can stay until then. After that, you'll have to be a customer." "A customer," he said. "I can do that." "Caden, yes. If you want to come back tomorrow," she said, very carefully, looking at the croissant and not at him. "I open at 6. A pause, the particular quality of a silence that holds something it has been holding for a very long time and is finally being allowed to set it down.
"What time do you get here?" he said. "4," she said. "Then I'll be here at 4," he said. She looked up. He was not performing. He was not managing. He was standing in her bakery at 5:47 in the morning, completely open, completely present, completely hers to decide about, not claiming, not asking, just here. She handed him an apron. "The sourdough starter needs feeding. Make yourself useful." He put on the apron. He washed his hands. He stood at the bench beside her, and she showed him the starter and the specific motion of the feeding, and he did it wrong the first time and right the second time, and neither of them said anything about the fact that this was the beginning of something or the continuation of something, or both simultaneously. The bakery smelled like bread and the beginning of things. Outside, Marin's Point was waking up. Dolores would arrive at 7:45. She was going to have a great deal of opinions. Iris found she didn't mind at all. The end. Thank you for listening to Moonbound Chronicles, The Girl He Left at the Altar, a complete werewolf romance audiobook. If this story moved you, subscribe, comment, and share it with someone who deserves a love story that earns its ending. New stories every week on Moonbound Chronicles.